Okay, so I need to cover carboxylic acids and esters before we get into uh, lipids, because lipids, especially fatty acids, will be fatty acids are a type of carboxylic acid, and esters are triglycerides. Okay, that's my cat. All right. Okay, so carboxyls are a type of functional group. Uh, they have this arrangement, okay, and when you attach them to a carbon group, you can come up with different types of molecules, just like when you added a hydroxyl to a carbon group, you got alcohol. When you add a carbonyl to a carbon group, you got aldehyde or a ketone. The first group we're going to talk about here is called carboxylic acid. Okay, and it's a carboxyl group with an R group and an H at the end. So it's kind of similar. If you look at this structure here, it actually looks like a combination between carbonyl, and that's actually where you get the name, like there's the carbonyl part, and it has a hydroxyl. So that's why it has this in it. Okay, so carboxyl. All right. So it has a little bit of like alcohol and carbonyl properties. Okay, so we're going to talk about carboxylic acids, and then we're going to expand on that. So, well, I guess we'll get into this now. So when we had hydroxyls, what you did is you took a hydroxyl group, OH, you attached it to a carbon group, and you got an alcohol. But we found out that if you replace the NH with another carbon group, you get an ether. Okay. All right. So this part here is common between the alcohol and the ether. Well, actually, this part here. The difference is the end. Okay, will have an H or an R. Okay. The aldehyde's similar. You had your carbonyl group. Okay. Right there. And the carbon attached to the carbonyl group. When it had H is an aldehyde, but when you replace the H with another carbon group, you got a ketone. And we're going to see a similar thing here. We have here's our group that's common between these two. So if it has an H at the end, it's a carboxylic acid, and when the H is replaced with another carbon, then it's ester. So I kind of like to call these, this is when these are the trapped. Okay, these are trapped by carbons, and this has hydrogens on the ends. Okay, so there's a lot of commonalities, similarities between these sets. All right, we're going to go over carboxylic acids, some common ones, and then how to name them. It's fairly straightforward. The simplest carboxylic acid is formic acid. All right. We in the previous test you heard about formaldehyde. Okay, remember formaldehyde? Okay. So it was the simplest aldehyde. Okay, well the simplest carboxylic acid is formic acid. Now, we're going to see in a minute that the formal way, or the way we normally name carboxylic acids, is have oic acid at the end. But the first two, just like the first two aldehydes, are going to have common names, formic acid. Okay. I don't know if you've ever experienced formic acid, but if you've ever been attacked by ants or had an insect bite, you may have smelled or seen the effects of formic acid. The word form actually is related to how the Greeks word for ant. Okay, so know the structure here and its name. All right, the 2-carbon carboxylic acid is acetic acid. Now, remember you had acetaldehyde. Here you have acetic acid. So that these two names are common because they're both two double carbons And now this guy is found in vinegar. It's the main component of vinegar. Vinegar is about 5% acetic acid, which gives it its distinct taste and smell. So you have to know these two guys and their common names. Now we're going to go over some that have their more scientific names they have to derive. Now, before we get into that, some of the places that you may have noticed, may have seen, carboxylic acids, we'll see will be fatty acids. That's going to be covered in this test. And in test five, Test 4, we'll talk about amino acids, which have carboxylic acids in them. You may have heard of lactic acid, all right? Typically, they talk about it when in exercise. Or citric acid, you may have heard of that, like in fruit juices, but it's also involved with the second step in oxidative phosphorylation, the TCA, or the Krebs cycle. And tricarboxylic acids, these are found in the Krebs cycle as well. Okay, so what we're going to do is learn how to name the other carboxylic acids besides the first two that just have common names. So the one carbon carboxylic acid is formic acid. The second one is acetic acid. Now, the first carbon, formic acid, could be called methanoic acid because it's only one carbon. The second, the two carbon could be ethanoic acid, but they have their more common names. So here's a 5 carbon carboxylic acid. All right, and so the way that we name it, we use it pentane, but instead of having the E at the end, you add oic acid. Pretty straightforward. Now, in terms of a little bit more complicated ones, these name according to groups attached. You do it name just like we did aldehydes. Aldehydes are a good way to kind of remember. So you always start from the end with a carbonyl. The carboxylic acid. So this is carbon 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's heptanoic acid. And we're going to go this direction, the numbering. So it has 2 methyls coming off of number 3. So it's 3,3-dimethyl. And ethyl coming off of number 5. So it's 5-ethyl, 3,3-dimethyl heptanoic acid. Okay, now one of the properties of acids, and we're not going to cover it right this second, is that when you put an acid in the water, it will lose an H+. And it's essentially the same molecule. So this is the molecule we had on the previous page, was pentanoic acid. But when it loses its H, okay, technically H+, the name becomes pentanoate, and that's going to be important in a few minutes. Okay. All right. So in the previous test, we talked about the oxidation of primary alcohol to aldehyde. Well, you can further oxidize an aldehyde to a carboxylic acid. Now, the way that we talked about oxidizing a primary to a primary alcohol to aldehyde was you had to lose 2 H's. But I told you there was another way to be oxidized, and that is to gain oxygen, and that's what happens here. So what happens here is an oxygen finds its way in between here, and now you got acetaldehyde being converted to acetic acid. It doesn't happen to secondary alcohols are oxidized to ketones, but ketones can't be oxidized any further because they don't have an H at the end. All right, next group, esters. Okay, esters are they have a trapped carboxyl group. So what we're going to do is we're going to replace the H with another carbon group. And we're going to see how to name these, and also how to form them. Esters are important because Well, they're fats. When triglycerides are formed, should be because triglycerides are esters formed from fatty acids and alcohols. No, this is fine. We'll get to this in the next chapter. Fats are a type of triglyceride. And the way that we can form them is fairly easy. You just take carboxylic acid and with alcohol, mix them together. Actually, not just mix them, but actually chemically combine them, and they'll produce our ester and our water. And we'll talk about that happening. So we're going to see esters when we talk about triglycerides and other places from and next chapter and chapter test 4 and 5. So let's talk about the formation of an ester. All right. So what you do, so what I'm going to do is take ethyl alcohol. So the formation of an ester requires an alcohol and a carboxylic acid. And follow along how this is done. So I have my ethyl alcohol. All right. So here's the 2-carbon alcohol, and here's my carboxylic acid. All right. Notice I have the OH lined up right next to the H of the acetic acid. Now, when the chemical reaction takes place, these two guys pop off. Okay, and what they do is they form water. All right. So that's step 1. Step 2 is these two guys combine. So the CH2, CH3, C2 connect right here, okay? So here's your alcohol part, and here's your carboxylic acid part. Okay. Now the naming is now, this is a 2-carbon group, so it's ethyl, and this is acetic acid without the H, so it's acetate. Okay. So see how this works. Run through it again. So you have ethyl alcohol. You're going to put the OH right next to the H of the acetic acid. It can be any carboxylic acid. These two guys pop off, form water, HOH. And then these two guys snap together to form this guy. Then to name it is the alcohol part. Since it's lost its OH, it's just a carbon group, and it's a 2-carbon group, so it's ethyl. And this is acetic acid without the H because it's lost its H, and so it's acetate. And so you're going to have to be able to either do these or familiarize yourself how they're done. All right, and the steps again, what you do is you knock the H off the carboxylic acid, the OH, the alcohol, combine them. And then the molecular fragments from the acid and the alcohol come together, snap together, and you got your ester. Okay, so you're going to show another one. We're going to get a little more detailed here about parts. So this type of reaction is called esterification, which means formation of an ester. And we're going to make it fairly simple, I hope, is you take an alcohol or line it up just like this with its OH pointing right next to the carboxylic acid. So here's the alcohol and carboxylic acid. And what we're going to do is we're going to break off the OH of the alcohol and the H of the carboxylic acid, combine them together, and they form water. Okay? And then the butyl group is going to combine with the carboxylic acid that's lost its H. Okay, and what they do is they form butyl, because here's your butyl group, propanate, which is propanoic acid without an H. Butyl propanate. Okay, this bond right here is called an ester bond. She's the sister of James. Okay, ester bond. Okay. So that's what you have to know. You need to know the parts. What happens? The OH, the hydroxyl, breaks off the alcohol, combines with the H of that carboxylic acid. They combine to form water. And then the two fragments from the alcohol and the carboxylic acid come together and form the ester. Okay. And we'll always try to draw it in this formation. We have the alcohol on the left, the carboxylic acid on the right, and the OH points towards the H, so you can see how they pop And remember, since it's butanol without its hydroxyl, so it's butyl, and then it's propionate. Okay, so study this reaction. Now, the reverse of esterification is called hydrolysis, and what we're going to do is we're going to take the last reaction we did, type reaction we did, and just reverse it. And we're going to see that both of these reactions are important when we talk about the formation of triglycerides and the breaking apart of triglycerides. Okay, so this time we're going to start out with our ester, and then we're going to add water. And if you look at the previous reaction, this is just the opposite. Okay, so this was the type of product that we end up with the ester and water. Now we're going to take these two together and form our original two things that we started out with. So you're going to take ester, and what happens is the H of one of the H's combines with the carboxylic acid part. So acetate now gains its H and becomes acetic acid. Okay, and it broke off. And the OH then combines with the ethyl to form ethyl alcohol or ethanol. Okay, so the ester bond is broken. This process is called hydrolysis. Hydrolysis means to break with water. Lysis means break. Hydro, water, and ester. Okay, notice this is the opposite of the reaction that we showed in our last previous slides that did this. Took the carboxylic acid and the alcohol to form the ester and water. And you got to be able to know both of these reactions. Okay, other places esters are found in things that smell and taste pleasant. And here's some examples. So the smell in bananas, pears, oranges, pineapples, apricots, all the fruits are basically esters. Okay, here's a list of them. So if you were to buy, so this is what gives the banana its special smell, pentyl acetate. All right. So it's really easy to make pentyl acetate. You just take some pentanol. Okay, so you take pentanol. So this part right here. All right. So this is pentanol with the OH. All right. So you take pentanol, combine it with acetic acid. All right. And when you do that, the OH pops off of this guy, and the H pops off of the acetic acid, and they form water, and then you get pentyl acetate. Okay, and this is fairly easy to make. You just take you just take some pentanol, you add it to acetic acid, you heat it up a little bit, add a little bit of sulfuric acid, and boom, you got banana smelling. So if you ever get, things that say they have artificial flavoring for like oranges, bananas, pears, pineapples, and so forth, is that they just did this, made this in the lab. And this is exactly the same, whether it's made in the lab or not, whether it's the lab or the fruit, it's the same chemical. All right, so that's it. And this then leads to the lipids. Okay.